Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the 49th line. My name is Logan, and today we're going to be talking about something I never even planned on making a video on. But the more I read about the changes to OSAP here in Ontario, and the more that I listened to the comments coming from our leadership, the more I sat with the tone behind it all, the more it started to bother me. Because this isn't about student loans, it's about something way deeper than that. It's about the story we're being told. The story that if young Canadians are struggling, it must be because they chose wrong. The story that taxpayers don't want to fund education. The story that if you're behind, it's because you made poor life decisions. And that narrative is convenient, but it doesn't survive contact with reality. Now, let's lay this out clearly. Ontario has already reduced OSAP support in previous years. The grant to loan ratio was altered significantly after 2018. Many low and middle income students saw non repayable grants shrink and loans increase. And now we're seeing another shift, with grants capped at roughly 25% of the total price in some cases, pushing more burden onto the loans. Loans that don't disappear, loans that follow people around for a decade or sometimes more. At the same time, the tuition freeze that has been placed previously has been lifted, allowing institutions to raise tuition once again. Modestly, yes, but a pretty steady increase. And Ontario has some of the highest tuition rates in the country already. The average undergraduate tuition in Ontario sits above $7,000 per year. That's tuition alone. That doesn't include the books, or the rent, or the groceries, or transportation to get you to and from your school. A 4-year degree easily pushes $30,000 to $40,000 just in tuition. Once you add on the living costs, that number can easily double. So when the grant portion shrinks and the loan portion grows, we're not talking about minor tweaks here. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in additional debt at the starting line of adulthood. And we are doing this while publicly acknowledging that we already have workforce shortages. That's where the logic starts to wobble. Ontario has thousands of nursing vacancies. Emergency rooms have closed intermittently due to staffing shortages. Sometimes the wait times in hospitals exceed 6 to 8 hours. That is not normal. We are short paramedics, short respiratory therapists, short PSWs, short skilled tradespeople in construction. The province itself has said many times we need tens of thousands of more workers in the sectors over the next coming decade. So here's the obvious question. If we need more people in these fields, why would we increase the financial risk of entering them? You don't widen access by tightening affordability, and you don't solve a shortage by raising the cost of supply. That's not ideological. That's economic cause and effect. And then there's the rhetoric, the basket weaving comments that Doug Ford has made. That language isn't random. It's used to try to shape our perception. It implies that the issue isn't the affordability, but rather the irresponsibility. It reframes structural cost as poor individual choices. But look at the enrollment data. Most OSAP recipients attend public colleges or universities in programs tied to real labor markets, health sciences, trades, business, education, engineering, technology. The caricature of masses of students draining public funds for novelty degrees just doesn't reflect reality. The majority are pursuing employable credentials. They're just doing it in the most expensive cost environment this province has seen in decades. Not to mention, most programs require 1/3 of your total credits to be electives, or in many cases, allow 2 to 4 free electives in addition to mandated specialized or general education courses. That's where most students elect taking basket weaving courses so that they can focus on other interests that they might have. Now, let's talk about the taxpayer argument. Every time funding gets reduced, we hear taxpayers don't want to pay for this. Well, you know what? I got a question for you, Dougie. Show me one taxpayer who's angry about funding nursing school, because I genuinely believe it doesn't exist. You want to know what I hear taxpayers actually complaining about? I've heard taxpayers are disgusted by the automatic pay raises in Ottawa. After this year's pay raise, backbench MPs will receive a little over $218,000 in annual salary, according to the CTF estimates. I've heard frustration about waste. I've heard frustration about bloated administration. I've heard frustration about the government spending priorities. And I have never once heard someone say, you know what's bankrupting Ontario? Helping kids become doctors. That's not what the people are mad about. People aren't anti education, they're anti feeling like their money just disappears. And those are two different, completely different things. And come on, Dougie, let's drop the illusion that taxpayers are some kind of separate class of people. The apprentice paying income tax is a taxpayer. The nursing student paying HST on the gas she puts in her car to take her to and from school is a taxpayer. And the middle aged worker retraining after being laid off from the steel mill in Hamilton is a taxpayer. We are the ones funding this system at every stage of life. So when leaders invoke the taxpayer as the justification, what they're really saying is, we've decided it's not a priority. That's a choice. And it's a fair question. It's fair to question that choice. Now let's zoom out even further here. Ontario's population is growing rapidly. Canada's federal immigration targets are high because domestic supply for labor simply isn't keeping up. But why isn't it keeping up? Because over the last decade, housing costs have surged far beyond wage growth. Real wages have stagnated relative to inflation. Student debt remains substantial. Asset accumulation has become even harder for young adults. That delays family formation. That delays home ownership. That delays stability. And when you delay those milestones across an entire generation, you create demographic pressure. And then we act surprised when people aren't having kids or starting their lives. You can't separate education policy from demographic reality. They're connected. Ontario's annual budget exceeds $200 billion. Healthcare alone exceeds $80 billion annually. We are not a poor province. The issue isn't whether resources exist, it's where emphasis is placed. Education funding in high demand sectors is not charity, it's a long term productivity multiplier. Training a nurse generates decades of tax revenue in public service. Training a skilled trades worker increases housing supply and economic output. Reducing accessibility at the front end doesn't eliminate cost, it just defers it. 5 years later, you spend more recruiting internationally. 10 years later, you spend more managing shortages. That's not fiscal discipline. All that does is just delay the consequence till later. And here's the part that hits everyone. You can debate the tone, you can debate the politics, you can even debate the ideology, but you can't debate cause and effect. If education becomes harder to access while worker shortages grow, something just doesn't feel off, it's actually off. And when something is consistently off year after year after year, that's not a coincidence. That's purposeful direction. Ask yourself, why does our government want to take us in this direction? Doesn't make sense. Young Canadians today are statistically more educated than previous generations at the same age. And don't take that as a jab. That's just facts. They work longer hours, they face higher entry costs for housing, they carry larger debt loads. They are not less ambitious. They are just operating with way tighter margins. And when policy increases, that pressure, while suggesting they chose wrong, just erodes the trust with the population. Trust is hard to rebuild. If the province wants alignment, here's what that would realistically look like. We need fully subsidized tuitions in high need healthcare roles tied to service commitments. If you want free schooling, you need to stay in that career for a minimum of 5 years. That sounds like a good investment to me. We need expanded grants for certified trades programs because right now, most of the training is privatized. And getting your foot in the door with most of these places is nearly impossible. We need to reduce the certification fees for apprentices and even offer tool allowances for students based on performance outcomes. We need interest free provincial loans tied to Ontario employment. If you want interest free provincial loans, you have to stay employed in Ontario. That's important. That would actually match rhetoric to funding. Without that alignment, the messaging starts to sound hollow. People aren't angry because they hate this province. They're angry because the rules feel like they've changed mid game. They were told, work hard, get educated, build a career. Now they're told, you chose wrong, you borrowed too much, and you didn't plan properly. That shift doesn't land well when structural costs have doubled in under a decade. At some point, responsibility has to move upward. Policy shapes environment. Environment shapes outcomes. And when outcomes deteriorate, you don't automatically blame the people navigating the environment. You examine the environment itself. That's what real governance is. That's real accountability. And until rhetoric, funding, and demographic reality align, this frustration isn't going anywhere. Because cause and effect don't care about political talking points, they just play out. And that's where the conversation really needs to begin. If this resonates with you, if you've felt pressure yourself, or you've watched someone struggle through school or career changes in the recent decade, let me know in the comments. Let's talk about it. Hit like if you think education should be treated like an infrastructure and not a luxury. Subscribe if you want more conversations like this. Long form, no spin, no blind loyalty, just breaking down what's actually happening in our country. This is the 49th line. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.